Hello, everyone. Tomorrow, April 5th, is a dream come true day in the life of my husband and me. It is our 50th wedding anniversary. I have waited and hoped for this day ever since I was 7 years old, when my paternal grandparents celebrated their 50th anniversary. Their day left an incredible mark on my life. It began with a church service where all the grandchildren marched in, and it was followed by a big party at a hall. I was left with the truth that God was number one in their lives, and they wouldn't celebrate without putting Him there. They realized it was God's choice to allow them to live to celebrate that incredible milestone. I never forgot that day, and I wanted it for myself. So today, I want to first thank God for bringing my husband and me together. And He really did that. I walked into a bowling alley in Detroit, Michigan with my friend and spotted the most handsome man I'd ever seen. I knew not one thing about him, not even his name. But I turned to my friend and said, "I'm going to marry that guy," which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever said in my life. You don't marry someone you don't know. Guess what? I did. 2 years went by before he asked me for a date, but neither of us dated anyone else after that. I believe the Holy Spirit spoke to me the moment I saw my husband and told me one day the two of us would be married. 50 years later, I still think that's amazing. Today, I also want to thank God for his choice for me. It was perfect. Though my husband and I are very different, I'm a social butterfly, and he's happy in his quiet, alone moments at home. We complement one another well. Most of all, we share the same love for the Lord our parents instilled in each of us many years ago. Our parents deserve a huge thank you from both of us for this celebration. The firm foundation in Christianity they taught has been a glue that has led us forward all these years. Our faith has grown and grown. What a blessing. Now that you've heard about us, I'd like to share biblical facts about God's gift of marriage for all. And I'd like to ask you to think about your own marriage from a biblical perspective. Whether you're thinking about marriage, you're about to get married, or you've been married a long time. Truth is, the only thing that will ever really matter in your life is your relationship with God. If that is where it should be, all other things will fall into place. It won't be perfect. We aren't in heaven yet. But all things work together for good, as God has promised, because you and your spouse love and trust God and honor Him with your marriage commitment. In America today, many marriages are simply trials. If it works, great. If not, we'll get a divorce. Nothing about that is acceptable to God. As we all know, God first created a man called Adam. God told Adam in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, that he would live, work, and take care of the Garden of Eden. It wasn't very long, though, when God realized, quote, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him," end quote. So God created Eve. Then in verse 24, God said, quote, "For this reason, Man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. End quote. Think now, neither Adam nor Eve had a parent, so God wasn't talking to them. He was talking to us, telling us that our husband or wife is to be more important than our parents. But Adam and Eve sinned, and to this day, mankind is doing the same thing. Divorce is now very easy to obtain, and few give it a second thought. God abhors that. Read Matthew chapter 19. In that chapter, the Pharisees asked Jesus if divorce is okay for any and every reason. Jesus answered, quote, "What God has joined together, let man not separate." End of story. The Pharisees then went on to say in verse 7, quote, "Moses allowed man to give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away." End quote. Jesus answered them, "Moses permitted men to divorce their wives because their hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning." Now, listen carefully to the rest of what Jesus said. In verse 9, he says, "I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife or husband, except for marital unfaithfulness, and marries another, commits adultery." I don't think many people have thought about that, read about that, or have been told about that. This is also found in Mark chapter 10, verse 12. So listen carefully. Remarriage after a divorce, except for unfaithfulness, is, according to Jesus, adultery. Just think how many adulterers we have in America today, or for that matter, in the world today. And people don't think a thing about it. Let's review God's requirements in marriage. You may not divorce except for marital unfaithfulness. That is also the only reason one can marry again. Obviously, most people either don't know that or they don't care. The thing is, they'll know it one day, and they'll definitely care. It's the day they stand before God and explain to Him why they didn't know or didn't care what He said. Question: can you separate for marital abuse? Yes. But 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10 says, quote, "A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband." End quote. How many know or care about that? Later, 1 Corinthians 7 goes on to say, in regards to a marriage in which one person is an unbeliever, quote, "If a person marries an unbeliever, he or she may not divorce that person. But if the person wants to go, let him go or her go. The believing man or woman is not bound in these circumstances." End quote. So, if an unbeliever leaves, the believer can marry again. I pray he or she would marry a Christian this time. Verse 17 says, quote, "Each one should retain the place in life that the Lord assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is the rule I lay down for all churches, end quote. I'm going to read that again. Each one should retain the place in life that the Lord assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches, end quote. What about that does the church or its members not understand? Seems very clear to me. We have to ask ourselves, how many churches really, truly live by the Bible these days? Does yours? I make sure mine does. How can I do that? I have read and I know the Bible. And I, to the best of my ability, live by it. And I expect my pastor to do the same. That's our job as Christians, folks. Friday, April 5th, 2024 will be as big a day for my husband and me as it was 50 years ago. God led us to each other and has led us and our marriage through thick and thin. There are not enough thank yous we could possibly give God for that. Many couples, never make it to 50 years. We are blessed beyond. To God be the glory. Great things he has done. I pray that for you as well. See you Thursday when I begin teaching the book of Jonah, where we learn we are all really Jonahs.